Hi, it's on. As a consumer, I get really frustrated. How hard is it, really, to give me good service? Why do so many companies seem to not care about me, about my family, about us? Why are these companies who are so embedded into our everyday lives able to give us such an experience that is below par? Of course, there are great experiences in there, but there are really rubbish ones too. There are companies that just don't seem to care, who policies and processes are taking over. Somehow, taking over from how somebody feels, and where no one really seems to care or take ownership for being careful with your guitar or your luggage. Now, as a designer of experiences, and as somebody who works inside such organizations, I'm really frustrated because when I go into these organizations, I see something totally different. I see lots of people like you and I, especially at the front line, who really do care about people and their customers. What I also see is lots of people who are following a process to serve customers and offering them products in a way that prevents them from genuinely behaving in a way that is true to who they are and actually delivering the right outcome for customers. The people care, but the organization doesn't seem to. But the people are the organization, and it's the people in the organization that design this stuff. Clearly, there's a disconnect here. And I'm even more convinced of this when I meet and see companies who really do care, visibly, viscerally, and are delivering great experiences, fantastic products, and are commercially successful. So, what's the difference? When I was a kid, for a while, we lived in the south of France, and I was fortunate to learn French fluently, and it definitely changed and gave me a different perspective on the world. One of my favourite things about living there, short time as it was the pace of life. Often my mother and I would go and sit in cafes, and we'd just watch the world go by. I was 8 years old, and I was learning the art of people watching. There was no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter to tell us what people were thinking, to tell us their inner dialogues. People were not an open book. We spent time honing our skills, imagining ourselves into their minds, honing our observations of the little things that seemed to make the difference, that reflected what their identity was. Were they wearing a wedding ring? Were they wearing a fancy coat but tatty shoes? Were they polite to the waiting staff? Did they leave a tip? What do we imagine they did for a living? Who are they? People were fascinating. In my teenage years, my uncool period, as I'm sure many people can relate to, I got really into computers, and this was before technology was cool. They weren't as messy to understand as people. So at university, I studied computer science and artificial intelligence, where they suggested that I take a class in psychology. If you're going to program an artificial mind, they said, you might as well study the mind that you're trying to replicate. Now, two things I immediately noticed about my difference, or the difference between my time with the psychology and the AI lab. Number one, I was rubbish at programming and the required maths. And secondly, there were no girls in my computer science class. The psychology classes were far more social, more human, more interesting. To me, I embraced the messiness of humans and dropped the tech stuff. Psychology was like understanding the programming language of the brain with an added spattering of emotional randomness in there and some really cool, unexplained patterns thrown in. it taught me simultaneously about just how complex and fundamentally emotional the mind is. It also taught me about how ingrained some patterns of behaviour are that are there to serve us but aren't necessarily rational, and how being social is so fundamental to the human condition. It also taught me the value of talking to real people to do your research and taking time to understand them. I focused on how people interact with technology through human-computer interaction and social psychology. Basically, I studied geeks because I wasn't good enough to be one. Turns out I was a lot more of a people watcher than a computer geek. Turns out the world of work was similarly flip-flop between the emotional and the rational. In management consultancy, we were trying to make things more efficient, to scale up, to grow, to get more revenue, to get more cost savings. I worked on usability testing websites just before they were launched. So for our clients, a bit like the one up behind us. When that proved, testing it just before it was launched, to kind of raise more problems than it actually solved for our clients, we tried to convince them to let us design the website with customers rather than just test it just after it had effectively been built. It was user-centered design, and it's how we designed Sainsbury's online shopping. It made much better websites, but it didn't actually change how the rest of the experience with the company was, and made little difference to the decisions that the company made about what they should do as a business. But in spending so much time with people, getting inside their heads, this time I could ask rather than just watch from a table, we learnt a lot about what really goes on and drives them. And it's far messier than I think business was ready for. I remember once when testing a design for Sainsbury's, we had a fabulous lady come into our lab. She was Swedish, a mother of 3, very wealthy lady from a wealthy part of London. And I asked her what she liked most about the idea of shopping online for groceries. And this was 2001, by the way, so it wasn't that usual at all. She leant across and she told me, "It's great. You can have a little talk while you're shopping." It's a silly example, it's a fun example. But it's a real human moment in what matters to people. The website was utilitarian to her. She didn't care about it. She wasn't engaged with it. She wasn't engaged with being sold to. She would use it and Sainsbury's would make some more money. But she didn't care about this. It got really interesting when we had a customer come in who was in transition from male to female. And she was in to look at one of our prototypes for opening a bank account. This was not the Royal Bank. It was a long time ago. She arrived and she presented us a gender that she identified with. And our researcher knew nothing about this. But as observers, we had, let's say, spotted the situation. So what was the world like for her? While she was in transition, how did it respond to her, afford to her needs, to be recognised, to be secure, and incorporated into life? When the form said Mr. or Mrs., what would she do? Now, I could see the people in the room having these moments, these insightful moments of empathy. This is the room of observers. But their company was not ready to do anything with this insight. She was not in the use case. Her feedback was taken on board for the usability of the site, but nothing was done with the more fundamental thoughts about how that company as a whole would cater for a world of such diversity. Why does this moment of empathy matter if at the end of the day we were still making websites that were useful and usable and were driving growth for the companies that we were working for? Because the world is changing, that's why. And we're no longer willing to accept something that's merely usable and utilitarian. Customers now have access to real-time information about companies, their products and the marketplace. They're hyper-connected to each other, and they're creating their own marketplaces based on their own needs. And as they flex these muscles, their needs are also evolving beyond the functional and into the meaningful. People are demanding to be understood, to be valued, and in control. But many companies are still being driven by profit and growth motive, forgetting their company has a primary purpose to serve customers and to be successful enough to continue to exist to do so. If customers are in control now and choosing where to place their business, it would be best if companies genuinely understood what people care about and designed their business for this. And there are companies who have found ways to use empathy to design a better experience and, frankly, a better and different kind of company. One that senses and responds to the needs of their customers. One company is Citizen M. They're a great example of somebody that built a whole company from, first of all, understanding what a large section of hotel customers really wanted out of affordable luxury. This led them to realize that it was people, not the rooms, that make the difference. They oriented their whole business model around enabling a culture that could deliver the experience, and then designing a physical space in which that culture and experience could be enabled. Finally, working out how to operate a company that supports that culture in those spaces. They built the company from the culture, and they continue to run it day to day from the culture, not the process of running a hotel. Much like Zappos, who sacrificed margin to invest in their culture, which they saw as critical to building an extremely loyal customer base. If they can't find the product that they want for their customers, they'll simply go to another website and buy it for them, or send them to another store. Because for them, they've set their objective about solving the customer's problem, whether it's about the shoes that they majored in selling or not. 75% of their customers are return customers, have no need to go anywhere else, and their marketing spend is quite minimal. Now, when I talked to the CEO of Citizen M Hotels about their model, we talked through this, and he said, you can't compromise on any of these things. The magic is making all of these things work together. The right growth for your company will come out from this, but don't chase the growth. To me, this is where design and business intersect to create really meaningful, valuable, and sustainable companies that contribute to the world in a positive way. The problems of making companies operate smoothly, at scale, without the financials running awry, are often very process, systemic, and technology-driven. It's mostly a rational thing. It's definitely a business skill. And technology definitely enables it, but it also is enabling the change that we see as customers and our empowerment to be more in control and the experiences that we will now accept. What designers bring is the understanding of human motivation, the skill in researching for that and then synthesizing insights into creative ideas that solve complex problems. Designers are great at manifesting ideas into things and then communicating why those things matter. A designer starts by opening up the problem field to truly understand at a base level, what is it we're trying to solve for here? What is it you really want from a bank? And then narrowing that down to a few good statements of what could be created or changed, and then opening up again the possibilities of how to best create solutions, and then narrowing down one more time into exactly how to deliver it. You can do this through your own creative inspiration, but of course, if you involve real humans throughout all of this, real customers, then it really becomes human-led design. At the heart of decent design is human empathy. But all design requires translation into realistic outputs, because business should be following its heart to serve a purpose that customers and the business place value in. So then design must support the needs of humans inside and outside the organization. Now, I love this quote from Johnny Ive. about how J.J. Abrams, the film producer, is going to experience using Apple products, or at least Johnny's hope for that. The level of care gone into the design will not be explicit to J.J. That's what he's saying. It'll be implicit, but the effort for that effect is immense. We are capable of discerning far more than we are capable of articulating. The designer makes sure you feel it. So what does design look like in a big corporation like a bank where I work? The Royal Bank of Scotland and Ulster Bank are collaborating with the Glasgow School of Art, and these are a few photos from that. They're looking at what banking is going to mean for 16 to 25-year-olds in 10 years' time. And it's quite a big thing for us to admit that we don't actually know enough about this group of people. And that we might need to commit to a new way of exploring it. The students working on this project, and they currently are working on it right now, have spent a large amount of time talking to real people and capturing the essence of what motivated them. For any of you familiar with things like personas and archetypes as a design material for bringing customers into the process, those are not personas on the wall there. That is a collection of articulations of individual real people that we use through the design process to understand real individual differences and extreme edge cases, not averages of who people might be. This is rich and deep insight into people. They're looking at the symbolism and practicality of what's in people's wallets. What does that say about them? How do they relate to these objectives? These objects even, sorry. We explored future trends through cards that explore societal, technology, environmental and political trends. We brought those insights together to describe a world in 10 years' time that we imagine these people might inhabit. And even to explore some of these themes, we actually, like what is banking for and how to keep your money safe, we actually went to the RBS Archives, which is fascinating, to take a delve into the past to see what was the bank about and actually be reminded how little has changed. This is a blunderbuss from the 1700s. This is what I call old school bank security. But it was always thus. This particular project is at the kind of connecting stage. The ideas are now forming for radically new and different services that the bank can offer in 10 years' time. And we'll explore what needs to change now in order to be ready for that future. These are the activities of a designer, investigating a problem space to make sure that they truly understand what it is that we, as a collective, customers and bank, want to achieve. When you put this kind of thinking in as a fundamental capability within an organization and have a culture that encourages being connected to customers and support this with a rich set of insight, an understanding that keeps your empathy up and gives your designers something to work with, then you start to have very different results. The returns for companies with such a culture are shown on the left, and they outstrip the ones on the right who don't have such a culture. They highly value employees, customers, and owners, and they encourage leadership from everyone in the firm. So if a customer's needs are changing, it's almost inevitable that the culture forces people to change their practices to meet those new needs. And anyone, not just a few people, are empowered to do just that. Companies recognized as delivering leading customer experiences are outperforming their peers in terms of all the metrics that business cares about right now, and the metrics that the market cares about right now. The economic case for empathy is clear, and the way to bring about it is to combine business and design. I think that good business is human-centered, design-led, and sustainably delivered. Because now it's the time of the empathy economy. Thank you.